Senator Stennet mentioned, Idaho passed a constitutional carry bill, but it had caveats. The revision of this law that we are proposing today will amend constitutional carry to better clarify the rights of law-abiding Idahoans. Currently in Idaho, any resident who is 21 years or older may carry a concealed firearm statewide without a permit. However, law-abiding adults who are between the ages of 18 and 21 do not have that right to carry inside city limits. They cannot carry a firearm without a permit in city limits. Constitutional rights should not be denied to law-abiding adults based on age or location. Our legislation aims to extend equal Second Amendment rights to all legal adults in the state of Idaho. If passed, it will allow all law-abiding residents in the state of Idaho who are 18 years or older to conceal carry a firearm statewide in city limits or not. It is our belief that the current restrictions have no real practical purpose other than to put an unfair restriction on young adults, and our goal is to do away with that discrimination, if you will. This bill does carry a special significance to me. In a little over a year, I will be 18 years old. I'll be a legal adult. I will be old enough to vote. I will be legally old enough to purchase a firearm, and I will also be old enough to be trusted by Idaho law to open carry a firearm in city limits and to conceal carry a firearm without a permit, but only outside of city limits. And this limitation is frustrating to me, considering that according to the National Bureau of Economic Research, you're more likely to be a victim of a crime, a violent crime, in an urban area than you are as opposed to a rural area. And concealed carry is intended for the express purpose of protecting yourself from a crime. And yet, law-abiding young adults are currently forbidden from freely carrying firearms for self-defense in the places where they're most likely to need them. When I turn 18, I will also be old enough to be conscripted into the military. It's my firmly held belief that if I can be drafted and called overseas to bear arms in defense of my country, I ought to be allowed to freely keep and bear arms in defense of myself and my family here at home. Our current constitutional carry law creates a weird 3-year gap between the time you become a legal adult and when you are granted your full Second Amendment rights. I do not believe that law-abiding young adults should be disenfranchised from their right to keep and bear arms when, where, and how they choose, only requiring the Second Amendment as your permit. It is for these reasons that I will encourage the members of this committee for their support of this bill. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee, for your time, and I will stand for questions.
Thank you. Very well done.
Madam Chairman.
Yes, Senator Stennet.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good morning. Thanks for being here. You mentioned freely being able to carry weapons if you're in the military, but the military is very restricted about how they manage, even on their bases. They are held to have very defined instructors. They have, for good reason, very rigorous training, and when they're done with it, they are put away and locked up, and they're not off the base. And so I don't think that's as freely as you are hoping to expect an 18-year-old to wander around with. Also, too, if they're 18, even though they're trained daily, they are not allowed to be carrying the weapons when they're not doing post. So this doesn't require any kind of training, so I'm wondering how you think that these are similar.
Mr. Fisher.
Madam Chairwoman and Senator Stennet. So in reference to that, I would say that the principle is still the same. The idea that you are expected to bear arms in the event of a war in defense of your country, in defense of your fellow countrymen, and carrying a firearm in defense of yourself. I can't speak to what regulations the military would put on the use of a firearm, but what I can say is that the principle remains the same. If you can be expected to, sometimes against your will, carry a firearm in defense of other people, you should be allowed to freely carry a firearm in defense of yourself here at home. And as far as training goes, I know that's an issue that has brought up. I believe that training should not be necessary for this. Training is not required for open carry, and nor is it required for concealed carry for any other individual who is 21 or 18 inside city limits or out. So, if that answers your question.
Thank you. Follow up. One of the biggest problems law enforcement has is gang activity, and much of it is in schools. And even though you're saying that that activity wouldn't happen, or we've just heard necessarily, because they're not supposed to be allowed in schools, but they do. And so kids your age can be given guns from 18-year-olds. And so how do you feel like law enforcement and or the society and or schools are capable of keeping themselves protected if members of the student body are able to be carrying?
Sufficient.
Can you repeat the question?
Senator Stennet speaking. Gangs will do whatever they're going to do. I mean, the law already prohibits them from bringing guns on school grounds. So they're already breaking the law regardless, and I don't believe that one more law is going to prevent gangs from suddenly deciding to become model citizens. I think that could be a concern, but I don't think one more law is going to prevent gangs from doing something that they're already not supposed to do.
Senator Winder?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a quick question. You mentioned in your testimony that an 18-year-old could buy a gun. I don't think that's the case, but when everyone else comes up, would you testify about that, please?
I didn't laugh out loud that time.
Madam Chairwoman and Senator Winder, it is true that you cannot purchase a handgun, from a federally licensed dealer, but you can buy a firearm from a family member, a friend, someone who's not a licensed dealer in the business of selling firearms. So an 18-year-old could still acquire a gun, they just couldn't go to a gun store or a gun show or something of that variety.
Any further questions? Thank you. Very nicely done.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Representative Young?